Welcome back, you guys. This is week 2 of our video classes of Discovering Spring. I'm here again with Miss Kristen, as I will be every week, and with Miss Erin taking video. So today, what are we talking about today, Miss Kristen?
So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the food chain, or what animals need to eat and where they live and where they hide and all sorts of different fun things. But we're starting off with a really cool story called Scaredy Squirrel.
So just like all our classes, you guys, excuse me, Miss Kristen, we're going to start with our story. Again, we're going to take a walk with you, and today we're going to do a little bit more exploring. We're going to walk a little further. We did see some cool stuff last week. We're going to look again today to try to find some new stuff as well.
Yeah. And then of course followed by the craft at the end. So same thing, we'll do the story, then the nature walk, and then the craft at the end.
And if you hear a noise in the background, other than the birds singing and calling, it's probably a neighbor of ours at the Discovery Zone doing a little cutting of some fallen trees. So hopefully that won't bother you, and I think you'll be able to hear us throughout the walk. All right, Miss Kristen, so take it away.
Alrighty, you guys, so today's story is called Scaredy Squirrel.
And some of you may know this story. This is a story that I think a lot of the kids have read at a library. It's a cute story.
This is a good one. Scaredy Squirrel. Scaredy Squirrel never leaves his nut tree. There's Mr. Squirrel up there with a whole bunch of acorns. He'd rather stay in his safe and familiar tree than risk venturing out into the unknown. The unknown can be a scary place for a squirrel. So here he is in his tree, and pretty much everything else is the unknown that he's a little scared of. A few things Scaredy Squirrel is afraid of: tarantulas, poison ivy, germs, green Martians, killer bees, and sharks. Those are some pretty scary things.
Well, we talked about poison ivy last week, right, Miss Kristen?
Yeah. So he's perfectly happy to stay right where he is, which is in his nut tree. Advantages of never leaving the nut tree: a great view, plenty of nuts, and a safe space, and no tarantulas, poison ivy, green Martian, killer bees, germs, or sharks. So those are the good things about never leaving the nut tree. And then disadvantages, or bad things about never leaving the nut tree, is the same old view, the same old nuts, and the same old place. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. In Scaredy Squirrel's nut tree, every day is the same. Everything is predictable and all is under control. So each day he's in the same nut tree. Maybe he moves around a little bit, but same nut tree. Scaredy Squirrel's daily routine: 6:45 a.m., wake up. 7 a.m., eat a nut. 7:15 a.m., look at a view. 12 noon, eat a nut. 12:30 p.m., look at a view. 5 p.m., eat a nut. 5:31 p.m., look at a view. 8 p.m., go to sleep. So that's a pretty repetitive day, right? He's doing a lot of the same things. But let's say, just for example, that something unexpected did happen. You can rest assured that Scaredy Squirrel is prepared. Look, it looks like he has a little first aid kit. A few things in Scaredy Squirrel's emergency kit: a parachute, bug spray, mask and rubber gloves, a hard hat, antibacterial soap, calamine lotion, which that's a poison ivy leaves there, so that helps if you get poison ivy, a net, Band-Aid, and sardines. So he's pretty stocked, right? He has a pretty full first aid kit, emergency kit. What to do in case of an emergency, according to Scaredy Squirrel: Step 1, panic. Step 2, run. Step 3, get kit. Step 4, put on kit. Step 5, consult exit plan. And Step 6, exit tree, if there's absolutely, definitely, truly no other options. So here he is, right? He looks pretty ready. Exit plan. Exit 1, note to self: Watch out for green Martians and killer bees in the sky, right? So, and you see a little parachute. Exit 2, note to self, do not land in river. If unavoidable, use sardines to distract sharks. Exit 3, note to self, look out for poison ivy and for tarantulas roaming the ground. Exit 4, note to self, keep in mind that germs are everywhere. Remember, if all else fails, playing dead is always a good option. So he has a lot of different exit plans already. With his emergency kit in hand, Scaredy Squirrel watches. Day after day, he watches. Until one day, oh boy, Thursday, 9:37 a.m., and what do we see in his glasses? Looks like some of those bees he was talking about. A killer bee appears! Scaredy Squirrel jumps in panic, knocking his emergency kit out of the tree. This was not part of the plan.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh is right. Scaredy Squirrel jumps to catch his kit. He quickly regrets this idea. The parachute is in the kit, but something incredible happens. He starts to glide. Scaredy Squirrel is no ordinary squirrel. He's a flying squirrel. Oh my goodness.
Whoa. We have those here, you guys.
Yeah? He feels overjoyed, adventurous, carefree, and alive until he lands in a bush. Scaredy Squirrel forgets all about the killer bee, and not to mention the tarantulas, poison ivy, green Martians, germs, and sharks. That's pretty cool. And plays dead. 30 minutes later, 1 hour later, 2 hours later, still laying in the bush playing dead. Finally, Scaredy Squirrel realizes that nothing horrible is happening in the unknown today. So he returns to his nut tree. All this excitement has inspired Scaredy Squirrel to make a drastic change in his life. Scaredy Squirrel's new and improved daily routine. 6:45 a.m., eat a nut. 7 a.m., eat a nut. 7:15 a.m., look at a view. 9:37 a.m., jump into the unknown. 9:45 a.m., play dead. 11:45 a.m., return home. 12 noon, eat a nut. 12:30 p.m., look at a view. 5 p.m., eat a nut. 5:31 p.m., look at a view. 8 p.m., go to sleep. But he does, let's not forget, at 9:37 a.m., jump into the unknown, which is new and improved. P.S. As for the emergency kit, Scaredy Squirrel is in no hurry to pick it up just yet. Can we see where the emergency kit is? In a little bed of poison ivy, so he's not really in a rush to go get that.
That's pretty smart.
Yeah, definitely don't want to reach into poison ivy.
All right, you guys, so just like we did in our first week's class, when you bring your kids, especially for the remainder of our classes, where we're definitely going to be doing a lot of exploring, a lot of log rolling and all, we want to bring you to the green water tank and just make sure that your hands are nice and clean. If you remember last week, we found worms and slugs and especially salamanders that we don't want to get any of the hand sanitizer that we've been putting on our hands for our protection. We want to get that off just for our walks, and then you can put it back on after class. All right, so now you guys, I think we remember the rules, right, Miss Kristen? We don't want to run.
No running, hands to ourselves, stay on the trail, don't touch any
Go that way.
plants with 3 leaves, right? Because it might be poison ivy.
A little mushy here. We had a whole big storm about a week before we're videoing this, so you may hear one of our neighbors trying to probably cut some of the trees that might have fallen in his property. And then, actually, when we get to part of our walk today, you'll see one of our trees is down that we haven't been able to clear out yet. So Miss Kristen and I and Aaron will step over that. By the time you guys get out here, that will not be here. But that was a big storm, and you can see still there's a lot of water on the ground that we normally wouldn't see. So we had a lot of rain, a lot of wind. And then remember, you guys, every time you come here, you can touch the rock. We established last week, this isn't an egg, right, Miss Kristen?
Right. Does anybody remember what that is called? If not, it's called the quartz boulder.
It's a quartz boulder. And you can touch it, and as we go through spring, maybe try to figure out, is it warmer this week or is it colder? And I actually think from last week, it's warmer, Miss Kristen. And maybe right now, because we're coming and it's a little later in the day and the sun is starting to shine on it, what do you think that might do, you guys? With the sun on the rock, and it's maybe about 50 degrees,
Yeah.
it's starting to warm up. So each week you can start off by touching the rock and trying to get a sense of whether or not it warms up. I will tell you though that even when it warms up and it's summertime, it still may be a little cold.
Yeah. All right, so you guys, we have a really fun lesson plan today. So we're going to be talking about the food chain. And so what that is, it sounds a little like a big concept, but really it's quite simple. It really just means that everybody needs to eat, right? We have breakfast, we have lunch, and we have dinner, right? I do, Mr. Tom does, and basically all animals need to do that too, right? All animals need to eat.
So when you're on your walk, maybe your mom or dad could ask you just to remember, like, what did you have for breakfast today? And it's really the same thing. And like Miss Kristen said, all the animals here, they need to eat too to grow to be big and strong and to survive. So we're going to try to talk about some of the different animals. Maybe we'll see some of them, and then maybe we'll see some actual like evidence or proof that they've been eating.
Yeah. And so in the story, do we remember what Mr. Squirrel had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? We saw his daily routine, and I know for that squirrel it was pretty similar. Every day he ate a nut, right? He ate a few nuts a day. But in real life, and the squirrels that we have in the Discovery Zone, they eat a lot of interesting things, right? Not just nuts. So can we think of some of the things that squirrels eat?
Squirrels will eat seeds. They'll eat fruit buds.
Yeah.
Now this squirrel was special, right? What was special about this bird? This squirrel. It
So
sort of
this
has something
squirrel,
to do
right?
like a
This
squirrel.
squirrel was
a bird.
actually a flying squirrel, right? And Web Mountain Discovery Zone does have some flying squirrels as well.
So they eat something that most gray squirrels that we have here that are just do not fly. They will actually eat insects as well. So they're a little different.
Yep.
But
So ground squirrels that you see on the ground, they don't really tend to eat insects, right? They just stick to the nuts, the seeds, the fruit buds. But the flying squirrels eat
and so
insects
Miss
as
Kristen,
well.
you weren't here last fall, but a lot of our kids were here and we did talk about squirrels. So some of you might be able to instantly remember, or you might be able to remember, what type of nut were we finding last year that squirrels like to eat? There's one very specific type that falls from an oak tree.
Yeah, and I think actually we saw some of them in the Scaredy Squirrel story in his nut tree. Does anyone know what those are called?
Do you know, Miss Erin? Miss Erin knows. Okay, I'll say it. Acorns. Right? And the thing about squirrels is they're really, really smart. Gray squirrels especially have a really good memory. And so they hide their acorns all throughout the park, but they'll remember where they've hid them in a lot of areas. And who knows, there may be still some acorns left from winter that they're snacking on now because our winter wasn't that cold, it wasn't that snowy. So it was a pretty easy winter, so there may still be a lot of acorns left out there.
And maybe even just the top of the acorn. Even if we don't see the whole acorn nut, a lot of times you can see just the top. And that shows that most likely a squirrel ate the actual nut, right?
Well, what about, okay, so now we talked about what squirrels eat. What about birdies? What do birds eat? I can hear some birds in the background. I see one flying up there.
Yep. We can see and hear lots of birds around here. And so birds also eat a few different things. So birds sometimes, maybe in stories we see birds with little worms hanging out of their mouths, right? So birds like to eat different insects, worms, worms or seeds, things like that.
So birds will eat seeds and fruit buds, also some nuts. They can't eat big acorns like a squirrel can. Squirrels have big front teeth and they're constantly growing, so they can chew a lot of things like that birds couldn't. But yeah, so birdies will like to bring their babies, specifically worms and insects. So that's something a little different than most squirrels would be eating.
Yeah.
What else? Do we have bunnies here and rabbits at the park, at the Discovery Zone?
I know that I've seen lots of bunnies here. Oftentimes around where we read the stories, that's where some of our bunnies like to hang out as well. And so bunnies, it's pretty interesting because the baby bunnies actually, just like baby humans, like to drink from their mother's milk, but then the mommy bunnies like to have all sorts of different things like the grass or maybe even some bugs,
Twigs.
maybe twigs.
Yeah, more twigs. Yeah, they don't eat too much of anything that's alive. They'll just eat grass, twigs,
Right.
roots.
But it's very interesting
bark.
what a baby bunny eats is so different than what a baby squirrel eats. So every animal, just like how Mr. Tom might like cereal for breakfast, I might not like cereal for breakfast. So everybody
What do you like
eats.
for breakfast?
Maybe I like smoothies or eggs. So everybody has different preferences.
Well, I had
right?
yogurt for breakfast. What did you have?
I had a waffle actually.
Oh. And
Never
Erin,
can go wrong
I
with
don't
some
know if Erin
waffles.
even had time for too much of a breakfast, but she would eat an apple a lot of times. She likes fruit, things like that.
Yeah.
So, is that right, Erin? That's right. She's nodding her head.
She's nodding.
Okay, so we're gonna go down now. So we started on Froggy Freeway. We're gonna turn today down Classroom Court, and we're gonna do the entire Classroom Court loop, and that's gonna bring us back to Froggy Freeway. So you don't have to worry about that. You just stay in Classroom Court, and it will get you back to Froggy Freeway. So now we talked a lot about owls last week and where they live, but now what do they eat?
So I know one thing that owls tend to eat is actually, as we're approaching the vernal pool, is actually frogs, right? And so then where the food chain comes into place is then we can talk about what the frog likes to eat, right? So the owl likes to eat the frog, and does anybody know what frogs eat? I know that frogs like a lot of insects, and specifically frogs eat a lot of mosquitoes. And
Yeah.
then to take it one step further, mosquitoes bite people, right? So that's really how this works, right? So the owl can eat the frog, and then the frog can eat the mosquito, and then the mosquito bites us, right? So basically everybody needs to eat to survive.
Yeah, and owls will eat a lot of stuff. So they'll eat not only froggies, but they'll eat mice that are
Bats.
running around. They'll eat, yeah, so you guys, what flies around at night? Does an owl fly around in the daytime or in the nighttime, Miss Kristen?
Owl flies around at nighttime, and does anybody know what that's called? If an animal's awake only at nighttime, that's called being nocturnal. So an owl is nocturnal, and also a bat.
A bat's nocturnal. So are frogs. Actually, when you see a frog here, they may be kind of like sleeping and trying. We're going to talk about what they try to do to stay safe. But yeah, so bats come out at night more when it warms up here in the summer, and owls will eat bats. They'll also eat smaller things like insects and worms, and frogs will too. Frogs are very important to scientists because they'll not only eat things on land, but in the water too. That's why scientists find frogs and salamanders really important, because they eat both land and on water. So it really gives scientists a good understanding of the health of the environment in ways that other animals may not be able to.
And so you guys, behind Tom and I, as many of you might know, this is one of our 2 vernal pools, all right? Which is very interesting. And for those of you that were here in the fall, it might look a little bit different than it did then. I wonder if anybody knows what that might be, or maybe Mr. Tom will tell us why the vernal pool looks a little different now than it did in the fall.
So if you guys remember when we talked about vernal pools, for those of you who have been in the class, the thing that makes them different than ponds is that the water levels will change. So typically in the spring, there'll be a lot of water. Why do you think that would be? What happens in the springtime. What do we get a lot of? And we saw it like by our rock where there was all that wet area and puddles everywhere.
Lots of rain.
Lots of rain. And even in the winter, well, we didn't get a lot of snow, but if we did, typically that snow will end up melting and that turns into water, right? So in the fall last year, we did have more, this was fuller, Miss Kristen, than it typically was because we had a lot of rain last summer and fall. But typically, if you've been here a couple years ago, you know, typically in the summer, this will dry out. And because, why would that be important to our frogs and salamanders? Any guess, you guys? If this is dry, if this water all evaporates and disappears in the summer, could a fish live in here? No. A fish could not live in here. And the fish know that, so they do not live in this vernal pool. And that is really, really important for our froggies and salamanders because they know then this is a safe place to lay their eggs. And we talked about eggs last week. We're going to be able to maybe see and point out, I think the salamander eggs, look at our sign with that spotted salamander. On that sign, we've actually found a spotted salamander here under one of our cover boards, and we'll talk about those in a minute. So I can see a salamander egg mass. Yeah, so these, Aaron, if you can get closer here safely. Now I have some glasses on that, if you're wondering why, I can see through the water really well with these glasses. So I might be able to see a few things, but this is a good time for us to look because it's sunny. Sometimes here we don't get a lot of sunlight, but you can start to see, this isn't a great stick to point, but Miss Kristen found there are a few little teeny tiny tadpoles. Those came out, they hatched about a week ago from a mama frog. And Miss Kristen, when a mama frog lays eggs, they don't just lay one or two, right?
No, they actually lay thousands, maybe 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 eggs at a time.
Yeah, and these tadpoles are just like, they are our first real good swimmers. They came out in late February, which is as early as I've ever seen them before. And they lay like these big clumps that are protected by like a jelly. And that kind of keeps their baby eggs safe. It also makes it kind of yucky if another animal wants to be eating them. They don't want to eat that yucky stuff. So that is like a protection for them. And you can still see the egg masses here, Erin, if you're able to come down here. There's still some that haven't completely hatched. And if you see the green that surrounds them, that is actually, we talk about this a lot in our class. So a lot of you guys might know, what's green that ends up surrounding that jelly type egg mass that they leave? Does anyone know what that is? It starts with an A.
I know.
Do you know, Kristen?
That's called algae.
Algae. So there's a lot of algae. And there's probably many, many more tadpoles on this side because this is where they hatch. And typically the mama frogs are pretty smart. They'll lay them in areas where they think they have the best chance to succeed. So there's also a bunch on the other side. Not unfortunately in easy areas for you guys to see, so you're gonna have to be careful. We don't want you to fall in. Also, next week, Miss Kristen, we are gonna come out here. I'm gonna put on some waders and bring a dip net, but we're not gonna use this vernal pool because last year some of our tadpoles had a little trouble getting through the spring. So we definitely are gonna leave the dip netting to our other vernal pool, which will be fun anyway. What do you see, Miss Kristen?
Lots of egg masses in there.
Oh yeah,
too.
you can see a lot. And then I wanted to point out the spotted salamander egg mass, and that looks almost like cotton candy. Right in there. Those are salamander eggs. And the salamanders that lay those eggs are exactly the type that you saw on the sign that Aaron took a picture of. And again, Aaron probably showed you that these little guys, we're going to talk a lot more about this next week, but they're going to grow up to be frogs, some of them.
Do you want to check the cover board?
Yeah, and while we're here, Miss Kristen can take a look under that cover board, and I'll check out the other one. When you see cover boards at our park, we just want to make sure you don't step on them.
Yep. So these are cover boards. We have one here, one over there. There are a couple at the other vernal pool. And so like Mr. Tom said, we don't want to run over them. We don't want to step on them. And again, when we pick them up, we want to lift it carefully and put it back down carefully as well.
And we don't want to step on them because they could be somebody's home. So we want to make sure that we don't hurt them. Anything under there?
Nothing under here.
Yeah, and once we start opening these up a lot, we don't see as much typically, but you never know.
Yeah,
Not
just
too
a
much.
couple worms under here and some little sprouts.
And is the ground there warm or cold?
Pretty cold.
Pretty cold. So, yeah, it's a little trickier to find. When we warm up, we'll see more things. Okay, so we're talking about animals and food chains and who eats who, but we read a story about a scaredy squirrel, but we don't see any squirrels here. Where are they? Where do you think they went?
Maybe the squirrels heard us coming, right? So unlike Scaredy Squirrel in the story who's afraid of sharks and all sorts of different things, in reality, most squirrels and most animals here are really just afraid of us. So when they hear us talking, when they hear us walking, they tend to kind of scatter, right? Because they're afraid of us.
Yeah, so the squirrels hide. And that's one way that they protect themselves. And we're going to talk more about other ways that animals have a clever way of protecting themselves from getting hurt, being eaten.
Yep. And I think we actually talked about one tactic last week when we briefly discussed camouflage. And if anybody remembers what we said last week about what camouflage is, it's about blending in with your surroundings or kind of hiding by, hiding in things that maybe are similar colors or something like that. So that's a really great tactic that animals use so that they don't maybe get eaten by something else. Is they camouflage in with their surroundings so they aren't seen.
And I would say squirrels are pretty camouflaged.
Yeah. If we look around, lots of the color, it's kind of grays, browns, and that's pretty much the color of a squirrel, right? For the most part.
Let's think of some other animals. What about frogs? We're talking about frogs. Do they camouflage?
Absolutely, frogs camouflage. That's why sometimes it's so hard for Mr. Tom and I to find them in the vernal pool. They're definitely there, but they blend in by being that kind of dark color, and even there's algae around. So frogs definitely camouflage.
Toads for sure. We're on
Toads.
land
I know
all the
Mr.
time.
Tom saw a deer here a couple weeks ago, and I couldn't hardly even see the deer in the photo he sent me because it was so blended in with the surroundings.
What about birds? Do they camouflage?
I think some birds camouflage, definitely, right?
So, generally speaking, a lot of birds, the males will have brighter colors to attract a mate, but the females will definitely have less color, and the reason they do that is to protect not only themselves but their babies. They don't want to be seen in their nests. They don't want anyone like an owl to know about where they're living.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually, the female bird does camouflage.
Mm-hmm.
Birds are very clever about that. They also, this is something that parents may not know too. When birds go to sleep at night in their nest, they'll have one bird whose job it is to stay awake
That's very
all
cool.
night, so that if an owl came along, primarily an owl, they would sound the alarm.
Do you want to check the pipes or?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's check. So we have some frog pipes here. And we don't generally see a lot of frogs in here. We have seen one once. But you guys could check these out.
Right, because as we're talking about hiding spots and not being seen, this is absolutely a hiding spot for some frogs, maybe some spiders or buggies. So when you guys come and do your walk, you can feel free to check these out.
Yeah, we usually see some bugs in there. Again, a little cold right now, even for our insects and spiders. I think it's too cold too.
Yeah.
So
We don't see anything in there today, but again, each week we'll check, and you guys can check on your walk as well. So we talked about camouflaging, but does anybody know any other tactics that animals might use so that they aren't found or eaten?
so some run, like the scaredy squirrel
Yep.
and squirrel.
Some run,
Some camouflage. What else?
camouflage, maybe some make loud noises. Maybe if they feel kind of intimidated or scared, they might, you know.
So I can give you an example, like again, a bird.
Yeah.
So birds they sing, but more than that, they usually make calls, and one of them is a warning. And one that I can do, at least for you, is the chickadee. They're the little black and white birds, and their warning goes chickadee dee dee dee, like that. That's a warning. They're telling their bird family. Aaron really liked that, by the way. If you're watching at home, if the camera starts shaking, she was just amazed by that. And actually, the more D's they do, the more the warning is. And we might hear that on our walk.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I just did hear a warning. But yeah, so birds will make warnings. Oh, look at that, Miss Kristen. We found
What did you find, Mr. Tom?
another salamander. So now this
Salamander.
guy, would you say that he's camouflaged?
I would.
Yeah, I think he's camouflaged.
I think he's definitely camouflaged, right? The dirt is kind of.
Yeah. All right, so we talked about what frogs like to eat. What would this salamander like to eat, do you think? I will say that he likes to eat a lot of the same things that a frog does. So what do we say froggies like to eat?
We know that frogs like to eat mosquitoes and algae and little insects.
So
What about the salamander, Mr. Tom?
So the salamander probably can't get to a lot of the flying bugs, but definitely like to eat insects, like beetles. They'll eat worms and slugs. Even though slugs are big, these guys can eat them. They can eat a lot of stuff, right?
Very cool. Good find again, Mr.
And
Tom.
who would eat this guy, do you think?
Oh. So it needs to be bigger than the salamander.
How about that?
Is that an owl?
That was my owl. Yeah, you couldn't tell?
I thought so.
No. Yeah, an owl might eat them. All right,
And so what does that say about owls? If an owls can eat a salamander, that means the owls have to have really good vision, right? Because salamanders are pretty small and owls are pretty high up there sometimes.
yeah, well, we talk about owls in the fall, and they are amazing. And not too much.
Oh, another salamander.
Another salamander. Why don't we just leave
Yeah.
that guy?
We'll leave that guy. There's another salamander. So
You see
guys,
him,
make
Aaron?
sure when you come, you're flipping over logs and looking because there are lots of.
And you got to be careful now. We're going to have to be real careful rolling this log back, right? Because we don't want to smush them. But yeah, so we picked a day where a lot of the redbacks look like they're out. And they won't stay out for all spring. They'll kind of come and go. And they may start to return down below. So we'll put this guy, make sure that we don't like smush him. So maybe we'll leave the log kind
There's
of like
a
that.
big worm. Oh, he's going. Here, Aaron, you can get that shot. This worm is he's just going down into the ground. See, so there he's going. And I'm just gonna let him be.
So who would eat the wormy?
Oh, I know that maybe some birds like to eat worms.
Birds, frogs, salamanders, yeah. And we will be talking about worms in a different class. So we'll talk about what they eat in a different class. Would you say they're camouflaged?
Worms, I would say yeah. As we just saw that worm going back into the dirt, you know, he was a little hard to see. He was surrounded by dirt.
Okay, so we have camouflage helps protect animals, running away
Yep.
helps them,
Warning calls.
warning, making loud sounds. What's another? It's kind of the opposite of camouflage, really.
I guess just kind of making yourself known and showing yourself, and I'm not sure.
Or bright colors.
Yeah.
Bright colors. What would if you saw? We have salamanders here that are bright orange. Maybe we'll find one today. I don't know, but they may be in the water right now. But what would that say to other animals if you see like a salamander with a bright orange color? What do you think that might be telling the other animals?
Yeah, that might be a little scary for other animals, right? Kind of like, back away, don't come to me, because they're flaunting it and they're making themselves very visible.
Yeah, and they're saying if you eat me, you're gonna get sick. I'm poisonous. So that color is a warning that they can make other animals sick if they try to eat them. So that's another way that animals protect themselves. So we're just going along here. Again, it's a little cold. The salamanders seem to be the thing we're finding most. And if you guys want, you just have to work really hard to keep looking, and the more leaves you scrape, the more stuff you'll find. But again, today's a little colder. So I'm glad we found that.
Yeah, 2 salamanders.
And so some salamanders are in the water right now. Some have left the water after they've laid their eggs. We talked about this last week. The salamander we saw today and last week, those salamanders are unusual for us in that they lay their eggs on land. So they are land-only salamanders. Let's see, do we have anything else we can roll here? I don't know if this one's gonna roll too good. Not much here. And this feels like almost frozen. When we touch it, I mean, it's cold. So
Here's a big wormy.
oh, good.
See him?
So that's a
It's a
good
cool one.
that's a good snack for a bird or a frog. But birds will definitely be on the lookout for worms, not only for themselves, but to bring back to their babies.
Absolutely. Because like we said, everything needs to eat to survive. Humans, animals, everybody. And I think I see the down tree up here that Mr. Tom was talking about.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I'm hoping we see something jumping around that's a frog, but I just feel like today is not going to be our day for that. I think it's a little cold. And sometimes the time of day you come out here makes a big difference. And we've done classes where we have a 9 a.m. class, and we don't see as much as we do for like the 10:30 class. So sometimes just warming things up will really change what you find. And again, this is science, so there's no guarantee that you're going to find anything.
Yeah. And sometimes it's helpful to try to be super quiet when you're going to the vernal pool or even walking along here, because like we talked about, noises and humans is something that a lot of animals are scared of, right? So sometimes you can try to kind of creep up and be super quiet sometimes too.
Okay, so we tried these earlier.
Last week.
Even though we look a little bit like last week is this week, it's last week. Okay, so where were we at? Last week I know we found a snail. This Christmas found, we found another redback salamander type we just found. And I don't see him today.
And again, like we talked about, there could be salamanders and worms and snails, but we can't see them. And why would that be? What's that called again? Camouflage. So they might be
right.
camouflage, and we are just not even seeing them.
Yeah, they're like in plain sight, but we can't see them because they've made themselves really hard to find. So here's just a little wormy. Now a lot of you guys know we have a lot of worms, so when it warms up, there'll be a lot of worms. By the time you guys come out here in May, there'll be, I don't think you'll have a problem finding worms. Maybe we should look for that snail again. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you can hum again. Did everyone like Miss Kristen's humming last week? I certainly
It
did.
worked, so it was worth it.
All right, why don't we keep walking? We'll look for some
Does
other...
anybody remember which
Oh, yeah.
way back to the classroom where we read the story? So we're just coming out
Of classroom
court. So it's either this way or this way.
Right, we're back to Froggy Freeway. How do we get back to where we started? Do we go this way or that way?
I'm thinking this way.
I think that's the way we should go. So this is the way back. And sense of direction, it's one of those things, you either have it or you don't.
But
Don't.
It's good to get familiar here with the trails and all of that stuff.
So don't feel bad if you weren't right, because for many of you, your first walk around here.
Yep, and we'll show you up there. To the right is where last week we looked at the cool quartz rock pieces, and this time at the end of our walk we're going to be looking for a little something else to help with the craft. So we'll talk about that when we get there. And we can even tie in last week and keep our eyes open for some of the same nests we saw too. And again, that's what's so cool about the Discovery Spring class is how each week you can look and see what you found that's different, what's blooming, what nests are still there, all sorts of cool things.
Yeah, and so definitely for parents, like Miss Kristen is saying, the more times you can come out, the better, because I think that will give your kids the best opportunity to see how things change, how things stay the same, and really kind of give them that sort of overall essence of what spring is all about at the Discovery Zone.
I don't remember.
Now you guys, if you look really closely, I don't know if Aaron can zoom in here, but there's actually some big holes that, who would have made those big holes? Those didn't just happen on their own. That's from a woodpecker. And sometimes we've actually seen Miss Kristen, I don't know if you ever have, Aaron, but we've had a few toads and frogs hiding in there.
Yeah.
There could be definitely some activity in there right now. They just don't want to come out for it.
And even though the woodpecker made the hole, like Mr. Tom said, all sorts of different animals can use that as a hiding spot and use that, just like how we learned that owls actually lay their eggs in other nests, right? So it's pretty cool.
You want to look for your...
I know, I thought it was that one.
No,
but...
it was this guy.
Oh, was it?
He was in there.
Yeah. Let's see, this is where we saw the snail last week, so we're going to see if he's still here or if we can find him.
Well, if he's hard to find, you guys, what would that be called? Do you remember?
Definitely camouflage.
He's camouflage.
Because look at all these leaves, and these are all pretty similar colors to how the snail looked like, right?
Now, snails, you guys, they tend to live longer than slugs and wormies. Why do you think it is? What do they have that the other, we talked about this last week, if they have shells, that makes them tougher to eat.
Right, and it's a great hiding spot for them. Sometimes it can even look just like a little stone. And it's a protective shell. And I cannot seem to find him this week.
Well, and we couldn't find the salamander either, so. And that's a little bit like our cover boards. Once we start lifting them at the start of spring, the more people come around to the park and lift our cover boards, the less likely you're going to find things under there, honestly, because it's a little bit like if you were living at your house and somebody came along every day and lifted the roof up from your house and then looked inside your house with a big head and stuff, you probably move. So that's what happens with sometimes when we find good areas or our cover boards, we generally find more under there early in the spring when we haven't really been lifting them too much. But good job, you guys. All right, so we definitely saw a lot of tadpoles. They eat the algae. That's their food. We'll talk more about that next week.
Yep, we'll definitely spend some more time at the vernal pools again. And we'll show you I guess next week we'll show you the second vernal pool too.
Yeah, and that's where we might be more likely to find some froggies. Not so much in the first one because the wood frogs who use that one, hi you guys, they lay their eggs and then they live on land. They're gone. They're out of that vernal pool. So they are no longer living there. The second vernal pool, they're bigger frogs, bigger tadpoles, and the frogs live in the water. So they very well they should be around. It's just a matter of how cold the water is and whether they're up under the muck or if they're staying nice and warm. But we'll talk more about that next week. Now, let's see. You know, we didn't look for, Miss Kristen, are some little nuts that have been eaten and chewed on. Let's see if we can find some of that.
I know, I think we will be able to. I know on Memory Lane, you guys, last week I had seen some acorn tops. So we'll see if we find any here.
Yeah, more likely back there. So back when you guys turn where we were looking for the salamander that we found last week, right before you turn back on the classroom court, there's usually some nutshells that have been eaten up. And if you look around there, we forgot to do that for this class, but you can find hickory nuts. They're bigger, acorn shells, or just the caps. And not only, we talked a lot about squirrels today eating nuts, but also deer. Miss Kristen talked about how deer are good at camouflaging. Well, they eat a lot of the nuts here too.
Also, you guys, if you see on a lot of these leaves,
that's good.
There's lots of different holes, right? So who do we think ate that? Because it has to be some sort of an animal that was eating these leaves, right? Because like we talked about, every animal needs to eat to live. So maybe some caterpillars or different bugs came and tried eating these leaves, right? And left little holes.
Yeah, there's a bunch over here too. Good idea, Miss Kristen. There's a bunch here, Aaron.
So there really is a lot of different evidence of what animals eat out here in nature. All right, and so you guys, we have a really fun craft plan today, and actually for the craft, we need a little wood chip or a little pebble, but I'm gonna stick with a wood chip for our craft today, and that will make a lot of sense later. So as you're walking along Froggy Freeway on your way back, try to find a little, kind of like a medium-sized wood chip to do the craft. I think maybe.
Or if they don't want to do that, they can use something at home too, which is fine too.
I'm gonna pick a wood chip just about like this for my craft.
And you can see here, I don't know if Aaron is getting it, but you can see all the rain we've had, and that had all these wood chips on them before, and they just all kind of got washed out. We have a lot of rain, but that's good. That's what spring, it's supposed to get a lot of rain.
Yeah, because
we'll
like
talk
we
about
talked.
that too in another week.
Right. I know. I was gonna jump the gun a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk about spring rain, the water cycle. You know the water cycle, Miss Kristen?
Pretty to see these little white flowers. So again, as we're walking along here, there's so many different things, and it's all about keeping your eyes open and looking around.
And listening. Those sound like finches in the
Yeah.
background. I don't know if you can hear that. Those are finches. Maybe when we come back out, we'll listen for our chickadees. Maybe we'll hear a warning call. What do you think they'd be saying, Miss Kristen, if they're warning?
Oh my goodness.
Big people coming.
Warning.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
birds are constantly talking to each other to make sure they know where they are, they know where all their family members are, and to make sure that they're safe.
And even maybe some of you guys have dogs at home, and dogs do something similar too, right? If they hear something or if somebody is approaching, they tend to bark, right? And that's them also giving their warning call just the same.
Why do you think the bird would have flown away when they saw us coming?
Maybe they were scared of us, right?
Yeah, just like the scaredy squirrel, right? The scaredy squirrel runs and hides. The birdie flew into one of the trees because we scared them. And usually if we stay far enough away, we could watch them feeding. I hope you guys come on a beautiful day like it is today. It is gorgeous out.
Yeah.
I am shocked that Miss Kristen is wearing a jacket.
I know.
It's really pretty warm out here, Miss
Yeah,
Kristen.
it's beautiful.
It's very nice. All right, well, we can definitely hear the birds, but they're not being cooperative with us.
Maybe when you guys come out from your walk, you can try to tiptoe quietly to see if you can catch a bird at the bird feed. So again, see, maybe if you guys heard that noise in the background, that's something that would make the birds fly away. So when you guys come out from the trail, try to be nice and quiet as you go up to the bird feeder. Alrighty, so you guys, we are ready for our craft. Today we are making this cute little squirrel. Looks a little bit like Scaredy Squirrel. So we're gonna make that, and I have my wood chip as well. And so this is gonna be, I'll explain that part a little bit later. But so you guys should each have 2 of these little cartons, which is from an egg carton, I believe. And we're gonna basically turn these guys into a squirrel face.
So they're kind of brown color. Let's just ask the kids just one more time. Does that seem like they would be easier or harder to see in nature if they're colored in that?
In brown? Well, I would definitely think that that would make them a little bit harder to be found, right? Because a lot of times we see squirrels in trees and bushes on the ground, and a lot of that right now at least is pretty brown, right? So I think that's definitely maybe camouflaging as well. Okay, so what we're gonna do first, you guys, is you have 2 little felt triangles. So we're gonna start by gluing each of these onto any side of the egg carton. That doesn't really matter, but we're gonna start by gluing that on. Let's see. I'll put mine on this side. Little dot of glue. All right. Then we're gonna put it down just like that. Okay, and then we're also gonna do this one. Might also be a little easier to glue it on the felt part. Don't need too much glue. Okay. And we're gonna put that on just like that. And then our next thing, we see that the squirrel has little ears, right? So first, now we're gonna put on these little ears. We're gonna glue the ears on. There's one.
And for those of you who have been in our classes before, you know that whenever we start craft time, it gets windy. And that's what it is now. It's pretty windy.
We work with it, but I'm sure you guys will be doing your craft inside, so. Okay, so this squirrel has his ears on, and now we're going to put the ears on for squirrel number 2. So again, just 2 dots of glue on each of the ears. Perfect, and then we're gonna put them on just the tippity top of the Okay, and
So
then
we got the face and the ears.
Yep, and now we see that we need a couple little eyes, right?
Oh, that's me.
I was like, oh goodness. Okay, so we need 4 eyes. Okay, now this part can sometimes be a little bit tricky with the gluing. Here, Mr. Tom, you can take these back. Thank you. Okay, and so again, just a very little amount of glue on each eye. Okay. And we're going to put that on right below the ear. Oh, it's starting to look a little bit like a squirrel. Okay. Now I'm gluing the eyes for squirrel number 2. And again, putting them on right below the ears. Gotta add a little bit more glue. This is really just the trickiest part, is getting the one little dot of glue on the one little eye. Okay, so then now we see in our example that they have one big nose. So we're gonna put some glue right here on the nose. Okay, so just like that, and then we're gonna stick it on right beneath the eyes, and then we want to let it sit for a little bit while that dries. We'll glue on the other one. So I don't know, it's starting to look a little bit like that one. And then we're missing one last important part, which is the tail. Okay, so we see this tail comes up from behind, so we're going to want to glue it just like that on the back, okay? So it's probably easiest to do a little square of glue on the back of the tail.
Wow, you use a lot of glue, Miss Krista. So one thing, now that I think about it, you know, squirrels, you guys, one way that they make a warning to other animals is they'll wave their tails. They'll wave their tails. And if they get scared, they'll run in like a zigzag.
Yeah.
They'll try to like fool you by running like zigzag.
Pretty cool. All right. Very cool. Okay, and so then we have this little wood chip or whatever little item you guys have in your home, and then you can kind of turn this into a fun little game, and you can maybe even pretend that it's an acorn, that the squirrel is hiding the acorn or something like that. And so maybe we can...
What you can do at home, you guys, is have your mom or dad close their eyes, and then you hide your wood chip or whatever you decide to put under there, and you try to have them figure out, like, where did you hide it. So it's like a little game that
So
you guys can
Mr.
play.
Tom and I will exemplify that. So we're gonna have Mr. Tom close his eyes, so he's not looking, and so I'm gonna take this
Am I
wood
looking,
chip.
you guys?
I'm gonna take this wood chip and
Okay,
hide
I'll
it
close
under one of these, and he's not gonna know which. Okay. Okay, Mr. Tom, we're ready.
Okay.
So he's gonna guess where the wood chip is.
Come on, tell me. No. Okay, I think it is that one.
All right.
Oh!
Not that one. It's actually this one.
Ta-da!
So it's a fun little game that you can play with maybe your brothers, sisters, mom or dad, or whatever. So that's our craft for today, you guys, and I hope you guys have just as much fun making it on your guys' own as well. And so we will see you next
week, you guys, we're going to our vernal pools. I'm gonna go walk in the water. We're gonna bring a dip net. That'll be really cool. So we'll talk to you then. We hope you have a great week.
Bye, you guys.
Bye-bye.